It says I'm live. Let me know if I am, and I'll be right back. Am I actually live? Because that would be good to know. Or did I leave you with an empty chair? Welcome to a Monday night where we discuss things that are relevant to preparedness. And if you don't know, I am Magic Prepper. And yes, my hair is actually this way naturally. I knew you were going to ask. I'm hoping we might have some new people around these days, because anytime there's a national tragedy or a crisis or some type of a natural disaster, people send themselves over to the preparedness community in order to find out what they should be doing. So if you're new here, I appreciate you being here, and hopefully it works well for you in the sense of getting good information. 5x5s are coming through nice and hot. We've got Vanessa Stoller, Knuckle Buster. We got JD from Dallas, Texas checking in. We also have Get Prepared New York. We're going to get things started here just shortly as everyone starts to kind of get into the chat and get ready to have a good conversation, because we're going to talk about some preparedness incentives in the sense of some things that I need to warn you all about and some things that you should be concerned about regarding the aftermath of this recent assassination attempt of Donald Trump. And it's not to dwell on the particular subject at hand, because that's being picked apart by every means necessary by anyone who has a platform at this point in time. But we're going to talk about some of the threats you should be concerned about moving forward, some of the, let's just say, calls for additional action that are happening out there in the ether, and why you should definitely take your own personal security and put it to the utmost priority for you and your family over these next few months. Now, before we get started, I got to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. Thanks to them, I can do live streams like this one, test out gear, review things, and try to do my best to give the preparedness community good information. So big thanks to Midway USA. And all the live streams here are directly supported by magicprepperbeef.com, where you can get shelf-stable beef that's high quality, ribeye, filet mignon, New York strip. It's sous vide. It lasts 10 plus years no matter what on the shelf, and it can probably last quite a bit longer. But it is very expensive. So use code MAGICPREPPER to get 15% off, and you will add really high quality steak to your preparedness pantry, which I would find to be a very good barter item during an SHTF type event. But it also just ensures you have access to protein. But this is only for those who need to add a supplemental resource to their pantry. If you're just starting out, this is expensive and does not provide the calories required to have a long-term food storage situation put into place. So keep that in mind, but that's magicprepperbeef.com, which I will go ahead and put in the live chat right now, and it's also in the description if you're interested. Of course, there is a discount code. Now, and look, we got to do things to make things keep moving forward here on the channel. I'm trying my best to start expanding and doing even better stuff where I can. So I appreciate the understanding of why these relationships are necessary, right? So Daniel Pruill, I'm not sure how to say your name, says, sitting on the patio grilling lamb chops, and I think that's awesome. I do love me some lamb chops. Except I do remember one time when someone was learning their job for the first time and thought lamb was a bird, and when they found out that it was in fact an infant sheep, they got very upset about eating a baby. So that'll be something burned into my mind for the rest of my life. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of what you need to be really prepared for, I just want to touch base on what's happening to some of our fellow Americans here in Texas. Texas Utilities Regulator launches investigation into Center Point. 200,000 customers still without power since Hurricane Beryl made landfall. So just be aware, this is a week, more than a week now, where people have not had power in Texas. We're talking about 200,000 additional customers that still do not have it to this day. It's, well, it's just what to expect in a natural disaster. So make sure your preparedness plans orient around the fact that even if there is support and infrastructure in place to get things back up and running, it could take quite a while, even if you think the disaster itself is not necessarily catastrophic, right? And that's what we just learned from that situation. Just want to check in. I got Eagle Claw 6 here. Lynn Dudley, good to see you as well. Oki Khan is here, and Dustin Pribble, okay? Don't tell people about the veal. Exactly, Dustin Pribble. Now, Susie Q, hello, good to see you. Why do we need to be prepared for the aftermath of this recent attack? And listen, I do hope there are new people around. I really do, because more Americans need to be prepared, and more Americans need to kind of understand what's happening out there. Your political ideology does not matter to me at this point in time. What you need to understand is that it doesn't matter if you're left or right or whatever you consider yourself to be. This attack on Trump would have been horrible for all of us had it been successful. It would have been very, very bad for the entire country had that been a success. But I will tell you right now that there are large portions of this country that believe the opposite. And that's very concerning to me because as an American, regardless of political affiliation, it should be very easy to come to the conclusion that having a political candidate, the primary runner for president of the United States, being taken out in an act of violence is detrimental to our foundation. And yet it seems there's a large portion of the population that feels otherwise. And that's very concerning. And we're definitely in a very dangerous territory because of that. And this is why you need to be prepared for things to escalate into a very dangerous scenario. That's just my honest opinion, and I'm going to give you some examples as to why here in just a minute. And we're going to also talk about some other aftermath from this situation that you should be mentally preparing yourself for as well, because there's a lot of dialogue happening right now regarding everything you can imagine negative about this particular situation, right? So, First MP Live says, really big fan. And you know what? I hope your name is specifically about this live stream. So that's awesome. I'm glad you're here and welcome. I really appreciate that. And I hope it goes well for you. So I'm not sharing the source of this because I don't want to send traffic to this, right? But I am going to show it to you. I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to give you some insight as to how some of the more radical leaning organizations that are within our country that lean towards the opposite political ideology of Donald Trump are currently conducting themselves. And their thought process about the way things are going is extremely concerning because you can understand why anyone who has a righteous indignation to commit an act of atrocity should be considered a threat, because that righteous indignation for them resolves them of any morality issues, right? And that's a problem, okay? So let's talk about it. Like I said, this is from one of those organizations, but I'm not sending you there, and I'm not sharing links or anything like that. I just want to give you some insight as to what's being put out there in the ether right now, which is why you should be mentally prepared. These people aren't just talking about political candidates, right? They're concerned about anyone who they feel may affiliate with said candidates. And that makes life dangerous for probably most people who get prepared, right? Because regardless of whether or not you affiliate with one political ideology or another, there is a group and a camp that you are probably put into by others who assume which way you go based on your hobbies or based on your interest and based on your ability to prepare yourself, right? It's just the way things are at this point. The shooting at Donald Trump's rally took place just in time to maximize ratings for the Republican National Convention. Obviously, these people are under the impression that this was likely staged to a degree. The Democrats already seem to be accommodating themselves to a future in which they will be the junior partners in an even more authoritarian reboot of state power. Understand, these people aren't necessarily Democrats. I am trying my best here to convey the proper message and to let you know at what level this threat really exists at here in the United States, okay? In response to the shooting, politicians across the spectrum have decried political violence. But political violence is fundamental to all government, not least the U.S. government. Not my words. This is what these people are saying. The key to Trump's appeal is that he is explicitly promising to direct this violence against undocumented people, poor people of color, women, queer and trans people, anarchists, and other scapegoats. Everything that centrist politicians do to pave the way for his return renders them complicit in the bloodbaths ahead. So, before I get to the last little chapter here, understand that there is a large portion of this thought process that honestly believes that a Donald Trump presidency would lead to bloodbaths of the types of people that were just described in this, let's just say, anecdote, right? Anarchists already participated in the round of social unrest that ultimately blocked Trump's ambitions in 2017 to 2020. We know that voting, court cases, and liberal op-eds will not protect us. So, why did I share that? Because that's not the information you're getting from mainstream media. That's not the information that's easily found or sourced by those who are generally looking for that information in places like this, right here on YouTube, on a live stream. And if I don't share that type of rhetoric with you, you don't know it exists. And you might not assume that there are people out there that honestly believe that this is where we are currently as a state of our country, right? That there are bloodbaths coming in the future, and that the usual avenues of approach in order to resolve the issues that these people perceive as being issues are no longer effective. And they also have already claimed that they've participated in ways to prevent additional progress in regards to a certain political ideology. So this is here. This is in the space, right? This is not necessarily mainstream media reporting. But what are they reporting at this point in time, really, right? And you really need to vet your sources, especially when it comes to mainstream media. Because, look, I'm just a guy who does my best to figure out what's going on and wrap my head around the concepts that help us promote the idea of preparedness, right? I mean, that's my goal here, right? I want to get information that can help you better plan and build strategy towards how to survive whatever might come. And what we're talking about right now is because of recent events, and we need to understand that these events might not be singular in nature, right? So I brought that to your attention because that was just a small sample as to what's really out there. That's just a small snippet as to what is going on in those groups. And just so you're aware, that was one of the few that was reasonably shareable in the public domain without having to be censored to a degree, if that tells you anything, right? There are people on all sides of this conversation that have terrible goals and have very little respect for human life, right? But the people who are currently incited by this recent activity are incited out of fear, I guess, is what it kind of seems like to me. Fear of the future to come based on the fact that they now assume what they know will happen moving forward. And fear is a very strong driver towards doing terrible things, right? Order 66, for example. Now, real quick, I did miss some super chats here. We have Benjamin Birdwell. Should I get a Zenith ZF5? Also, I was in the path of Hurricane Beryl, and your channel helped me not suffer as much as a lot of the people around me and allowed me to help instead of add to the problems we have at the moment. Well, I'm really glad you were able to get through it with a little less suffering. I'm glad I was able to help you with that. And as for the Zenith ZF5, I just personally do not have experience with that, so I can't tell you for sure what you should or should not do in that regard. But I would suggest asking the chat, which I'm sure they're hearing me say this now, and someone here who's a lot more informed about that than I am would be able to give you some good feedback. So hopefully someone here in the chat can do that. I personally just couldn't recommend something that I've never personally even held in my hand, right? But I appreciate the super chat very greatly, and I really appreciate that you were able to take some of the information I've shared and help you get through an emergency situation, okay? And then I also saw Vault Dweller said, I don't think people understand just how close this nation came to descending into chaos. This nation and Trump are extremely lucky. And I 100% agree with you on that. Sherman Sales, you're here. I appreciate it. Listen, I agree with that statement very much because I don't care what your plans were to do in November regarding voting, right? But this would have been catastrophic for our country. And I need everyone here to understand, and I've talked about this over and over and over again. The goal of our enemies, it doesn't matter if they're foreign or domestic, right? Their goal is to sow chaos and is to create division and is to destroy our society from within because that's the easiest way to do it. And the chaos that would ensue thereafter, a successful attempt, right, would have been catastrophic 100%. So we are very lucky in many, many ways, regardless of how you feel about the situation. You have to understand that this was a bullet dodged by everyone here in the country, not just Donald Trump. Okay, so moving on from there, when it comes to starting with that warning to really amplify why we need to have this discussion, okay? And you can find a lot of that information yourself. I just personally can't share it here due to liability, right? I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble. I'm not trying to lead anybody down the wrong path. I'm not trying to create more tension than needs to be created. But we do have to raise our awareness, and we do need to know what we should be concerned about in the sense of risk. And you have to be honest about that in order to do it correctly, right? It's ridiculous to assume that you can be, inoffensive or at least to some level illogical while still being as practical about your personal security and safety as possible, right? Like, you have to be honest about the situation in order to be as prepared as you can be. You can't sit in a world of fantasy, right? So let's talk about things here that are going to be puzzle pieces for the conversation, and they're going to build themselves toward a larger narrative, which I think will help, let's just say, build a bigger picture as to why these concerns are legitimate, okay? That's what we do here. Gregor Zamina, good to see you. Glad you're here. Viv B here as well, and Harbor Prepper, awesome. Okay, so first off, this story sounds interesting at first, but when we apply it to what's happening here in the country, and when we get towards the end of this conversation, you're going to find out that this is probably more problematic than it sounds, okay? Trump media gun stocks surge after assassination attempt. Markets are betting on Donald Trump returning as president in the upcoming U.S. elections. Now, that's been in the ether as well. People are assuming that Donald Trump is going to win the election now, hands down. First off, we already had Biden with very poor performance in the debate, as well as being clearly not in the best of health when it comes to just being president in general. But now we had this moment of bravery, this moment of, I don't know what to call it. And it was a miraculous moment because the country just dodged that bullet as well, like I said. And this is me being honest now and not just trying to be pragmatic or anything like that, but that was the greatest gift of marketing and campaigning that anyone has ever been given, right? I mean, that's just the truth. So understand that how are you going to defeat this man at this point, right? So that's the thought process, right? Because of that, because even stocks are actually going up because people are so heavily betting on the fact that Trump is going to be the next president. I mean, we already have ambassadors from foreign countries and prime ministers meeting with Donald Trump, right? While he's not even in office or even elected yet. Tells you a lot. This is where some of the concern and the fear from these fringe groups is really coming from, because they also believe it now at this point. But their belief is that this was staged in order to steal the election, right? Interesting. So as we go through this conversation, I want you to keep that first warning I shared with you in mind. And I also want you to keep a couple other things in mind we're going to talk about here, okay? Now, I'm going to go down here a little bit. Tesla jumped 5%, right? Crypto stocks soared 10%, right? We know that these investment groups and these people that are getting behind Trump now are suddenly seeing the gains from it, okay? This is telling a lot of people what they already assumed. Trump is going to win. Even the stock market says so. Now, here's the one that you should be paying attention to. Gun makers and ammunition stocks, Smith & Wesson brands, Sturm and Ruger and Company, and ammo jumped between 7% and 15%. Gun stocks in the past have surged following mass shootings, civil unrest, and fears of gun control that have led people to buy more firearms out of fear that their availability would become limited. Okay. Shares of private prison operators, Geo Group and Core Civic, each jumped about 8% as well. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Okay. The reason I brought this up is because, yes, people are probably buying guns out of fear for certain aspects. I mean, some people are out there considering this to be the start of like civil war, right? Which is not my belief, but this is something that you should at least be aware of being discussed out there in the general community, let's just call it. But these gun stocks are going up out of fear. But what's the fear really going to be, right? Is the fear that there's going to be gun control? Well, I think that there's some reasonability there to consider that, which we're going to talk about here in just one second. But the other side of that is who's buying the guns? Why did all these guns suddenly get purchased? Why are these stocks suddenly going up, right? Is it anticipation of the wholesalers and the distributors that there will be panic buying because of possible gun control initiatives? Or if everyone assumes Trump's going to be president and likely have at least, one of the two houses of representatives, right? Why would the concern be gun control, right? Like when Obama was getting elected, that was a huge deal, right? Because, here we go, he's going to take the guns. But we're all betting on Trump. Even the stocks say so. So in the chat, feel free to have the discussion about where these additional firearms purchases might be being made. And we're going to keep that in mind as we move forward. Okay, now, everyone's paying attention to the fact that an AR-15 was used in this attack. This is obviously problematic. We know that they're going to leverage this towards gun control if possible, right? And we also know that a presidential assassination is not something to be taken lightly, even an attempted one that wasn't successful. And of course, they're now digging all the way into it. It's not just about the AR-15 anymore. It's about the gun culture of a family that was involved, right? And how that could be problematic as well. So just so you're aware of some of the pieces being put into place for possible gun control initiatives here moving forward. We have an online footprint ties gunman's father to gun marketplaces, okay? Police officials called it an AR-15, an ATF agent called it nothing special, but the rifle at the center of countless controversies is now at the center of the attempt to assassinate former President Donald Trump. Okay, an AR-15 rifle was found next to the body of Thomas Matthew Crooks, the 20-year-old authorities say wounded Trump and others and left one man dead in Butler County, Pennsylvania, which was an atrocity. Tragedy as well, and, to my knowledge, some children lost their father, which is really unfortunate. An FBI official said that the Bureau believes the rifle using .556 ammunition was purchased legally by Crooks' father, Matthew Crooks. The official on call with reporters said he did not know whether Crooks had permission to use the weapon. The Crooks family's digital footprint is small, but some of their few online tracks tie them to internet marketplaces that buy or sell guns, okay? They go down here to start talking about how he purchased things from Bowtac, which is like a website where you can get some just like whatever you want to get, tactical type gear and stuff like that. And then they also were at cashmyguns.com or something like that. Let's see here. Cash My Guns, I believe, was one of the websites that they found he was using or left a review on, okay? Cashmyguns.com right here. Said in the statement, the company, and basically, just so you're all aware, this information was found from a hack and it was put on the dark web. So this is not like legitimate information that was given to the press. This was stolen from a hack from eyeforfraud.com, okay? Eyeforfraud.com is a company that screens online purchases on behalf of e-commerce merchants for potential fraudulent activity. Its data was hacked in February 2023 and posted to the dark web earlier this year. Now, one thing that maybe I hadn't fully considered before, but I'm definitely considering now, is we never know who these hacking groups are that steal this data and then post it publicly on the dark web, right? But wouldn't it be convenient if you were either the government or the press and you had the ability to just do that because you had all the resources in order to be able to facilitate it, and then anytime it became valid or necessary to access, well, luckily a hack dumped all this information on the dark web, so here we have it. Not that we stole it, not that we invaded privacy. I mean, it was done in a hack, and we found it, right? So just keep that in mind, but all this stuff is tracked. And guys, I'm sorry, but trying to avoid being tracked for your purchases with firearms and everything else related to it, if you're filling out 4473 forms or doing anything else of the sort, it's out there. They're aware, right? They know. The boating accident thing is just a bad meme at this point. It's just, if we get to the point where all that matters, you need to ask yourself why you have the ability to defend yourself in the first place, right? I don't know how else to say that. But we're going to keep moving forward here because, like I said, we see that gun stocks are surging. But we also know that everyone's betting on Donald Trump winning. I mean, Tucker Carlson just said it, right? So because of that, why is everyone panic buying guns? I don't think that's what's happening. I think some people are buying them. And I think that they're maybe not the people you assume. Prepper Now says, I do not have an OnlyFans, but I do have a website, magicprepper.com. And that is currently publicly accurate. Anyway, Harbor Prepper, $10. I wonder if the jump in sales is driven by fear of the current administration trying to leverage recent events to force something drastic through between now and January. Some of that is accurate in the sense of retailers and distributors stocking up, in my opinion, in order to deal with anything that may occur post this event. Don't get me wrong, I definitely believe that, and I agree with you on that. Rocky Stone, you're not late. You made it just when you wanted to. But I also believe there are other forces at work here. So, now, Political violence being used as a justification to keep Donald Trump from office. Is anyone on board with this? Well, quite a few people, apparently. Amid Trump assassination attempt, fears of political violence reach new heights. Experts have been warning about the increasing normalization of the threat of violence. Really? What do you think about this, CBS? Well, tell us. Okay. University of Chicago professor Robert Pape, I'm not really sure, director of the Chicago Project on Security and Threats, said in an email that a national survey he helped conduct in June found that 10% of American adults, a third of whom own guns, agreed that the use of force is justified to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. 10%. Okay? So, I don't know how many people were polled in that. If it was 100, that means 10 people felt like that would be justified. If it was 1,000, that's 100 people. If it was 10,000, that's 1,000 people. Understand the scale of people out there right now, Americans, or possibly Americans, do we really know at this point, right? And being an American doesn't just mean you were born here, right? At least in my opinion. I think you have to have a love and a desire for the survival of your country to be a true American, but that's just my opinion. Regardless, if you want to, technical Americans could have been on this poll for all I know. Either way, 10% is not a small number. And all it would take is 1% of that 10% to cause some really big issues. All it would take is 0.1% of that 10% to cause some really big issues. This is where we're at right now in this world, okay? We also need to worry about the threats and retribution of President Biden. Our survey shows 7% of American adults, 18 million, support force to restore Trump to the presidency, half of whom own guns. Now, that number is just based on the percentage, right? They didn't poll that many people, but what they're doing is applying 7% to the population. Regardless, this is not where you want to be at. But this is what has been caused by this recent attack. Understand that not only from left-leaning anarchist groups or whatever they might be at this point in time, but far-right extreme groups have also been waiting for this day in many ways, which we can't ignore and we can't be dishonest about. There's a lot of truth in that as well. The problem is what paintbrush do you get painted with regardless of how you feel, right? Someone like myself. Let's say you had no concept of my political affiliations or ideology, but I post a lot of gun content. Sure do, don't I? I've got American flags in my content. I've got Gadsden flags. I've got all kinds of stuff, right? I will be pinpointed as a right-wing extremist / conservative no matter what I say or do. So my safety and security relies on me acknowledging that fact and me acknowledging who poses the greatest potential risk to my safety based on that profiling, right? And that's how you need to remember things, right? For example, you're a diehard conservative, but you're a trans person with a rainbow flag on your car, right? Diehard conservative. You will not be profiled as a diehard conservative just because you are, right? So these are things you have to be honest with yourself about if you want to take your personal security seriously. It's not about what you want to be had. It's about what others are going to consider when it comes to who they deem a problem, right? And that's where we're at in this country. I also want to mention that there has been a lot of threats against politicians for a long time now, and that this boiling over moment is just representative of all of that building up to this recent attack. And this is actually, listen, I'm a relatively even-keeled guy. I like to pretend to be anyway. Sometimes I'm a little crazy, but only people who know me in real life know that. Regardless, I try to get information all over so I can be removed from my own personal biases as often as possible so that I can develop a well-rounded opinion, right? This is from CNN, which is why I said that, right? But just in case you're new here, sometimes we go back in history to build context around what's happening in our world right now and what we need to be prepared for. This is an article from CNN, and it is from December of 2023. But it does a good job of highlighting a few things, okay? There's been a lot of violent messages sent to public officials over the years. This is something we should be considering because maybe this isn't put out in front of you as often as it should be, and maybe people aren't aware as to where some people's mindsets are and how willing they may be to act upon their threats. And if any of this happens, I mean, this is extremely concerning and detrimental to our country and safety. But what we'll do here is come down here because they went over a whole case and all this stuff. It's fine. But here's where they come down to their percentages, which I find to be interesting, okay? At least 41% of all the cases across the decade were politically motivated. And this is about their 500 federally prosecuted threats. And this is how they categorized everything in order for you to be aware of like where we are right now regarding the level of threat on public officials, which we should be paying attention to right now because of what just happened to Donald Trump. Nearly 95% of people prosecuted for making threats to public officials are male. The median age is 37. Politically motivated threats to public officials increased 178% during Trump's presidency. Threats related to hot political topics like abortion or police brutality also skyrocketed during the Trump years, increasing by more than 300% from Obama's second term. When I talked about this shooting in my previous video from yesterday, it was after I had time to digest the information, after I had time to really sort out my thoughts. I didn't want to go live and have a gut reaction to what was occurring just because I felt like I might say something that I didn't actually mean, or I might have had information that wasn't quite vetted to a degree yet. Like there's a lot of things going on in my head that made me want to just take a pause, right? Well, something to keep in mind is that in that video, I explicitly said that the media is complicit in this attack because of what they did over the last 8 or 9 years. And this percentage, this 300% increase during Trump's years as president, right, and post-president, clearly now we're in those years as well, while he remains a political powerhouse and the primary candidate for the Republican Party, that percentage increase and the 178% increase of politically motivated threats to public officials is 100% due to the media's coverage of his presidency and administration and candidacy. And that's just the truth. I don't know how else to say it. They have driven a political divide in this country so strongly for so long that people have started to actually believe the things that they're saying and taking it to heart, right? Which is why we know attacks like this are happening. We know that people honestly believe that he is going to come into our, highest office and destroy our country from within and have gulags and everything else. Like people honestly believe that. And we shouldn't discount those beliefs. We can try to reach those people by saying, hey, here's some historical context. You might want to take a look at some things and understand that like this isn't necessarily what you should assume. But at the same time, if that's how they truly believe things are going to go, understand what their reactions might be to that belief and understanding reality based on it, right? As the party in power, 16 Democrats received threats during Obama's second term. This increased 169%, with 43 GOP lawmakers threatened under Trump. You understand the disparity there of those numbers, right? This is all because of the media driving these narratives. They were so flagrant in their attacks on politicians and anyone who had a conservative background or anything along those lines for so long that they were able to rise the number of politicians being threatened from the Democrats of 16 to 43 for the GOP. Okay, so I'm trying to demonstrate, just because I like to clarify things and make sure that we're all on the same page together, because this is a community, right? Like the preparedness community is a group of people who, regardless of belief systems and religion and ideology and all this other stuff, right? The main goal is to get other Americans and other people, even in other countries, better prepared for emergency scenarios, right? The goal here is to survive things that are survivable, if at all possible, and to eliminate the amount of suffering you have to go through during that survival situation. That's our goal. So that's what we're here for. This whole conversation is to give you the concept as to how much higher that threat thermometer is actually going. As time goes on, those numbers are just increasing further and further. And another Trump presidency is not going to make it go down, right? We know how this is going to go. Those numbers are only going to go higher, which means the possibility of incident also goes higher. The risks become greater, right? And the tension and desperation of those who honestly feel and believe that their country is at risk and that the people they care about in their lives are literally going to be taken away and thrown into prison and disappeared from the world if this person becomes the next president, they honestly believe that they're righteous in their thought processes, and some of them have been so programmed over the years that they would be willing to do anything in order to protect those around them, right? I think we just saw that on display. And we're only going to, unfortunately, in my opinion, probably see more of it, right? And I'm going to say it here too, and I don't get biased when it comes to these conversations. I wouldn't be surprised if there was someone out there as well who was upset enough to the point of considering the idea of retribution, right? Which is also problematic and not something we want. And I hope everyone knows too, regardless of how you feel and regardless of where you're at in your mindset at this point in time as an American, if this same exact scenario happened to President Biden, I would hope that we'd all be just as upset and that we would be trying to figure out what we could do to prevent it again, right? Like this is not how we need things to go down right now. This country is already so fragile when it comes to the fabric that kind of keeps things moving forward and holds things up in the sense of a foundation. It's so fragile at this point that anything like that is awful for all of us. That should just be understood at this point, right? Like we should not be able to, we shouldn't have to argue about that. Like this is not the path we want to take, right? So now, also, this isn't just for political appointees or for public officials. After this happened, Musk came out, right, and said, look, over the last 8 months, 2 different people have tried to assassinate me. And that's something else that, look, and I'm not some like super crazy Elon fan or anything like that, right? Although, like, if I was given a Cybertruck, I would drive it just for the memes, I guess. but I wouldn't buy one at this point, knowing how awful they are. But I'm just saying, I like, synthwave, so what do you expect from me? It's basically a DeLorean truck. I can't really deny it. But this type of figurehead is also being targeted. And these people are associated now with these political movements as well. And so it's not just public officials. It's people with a platform. It's people who are well known. It's people who make their opinions well known. And for a lot of people, of course, Elon Musk has a lot of money and a lot of power, and they consider him to be the enemy of the state or who knows what else, right? But regardless, this should tell you that there are more threats out there than just just presidential, right? Like this is not just reserved for public officials or politicians. Elon Musk reveals 2 assassination attempts on him in 8 months. Incidents involved armed individuals near Tesla headquarters in Texas. Musk endorses Trump post a shooting at his rally in Pennsylvania. Elon Musk, the billionaire CEO of Tesla and owner of social media platform X, revealed that 2 attempts were made on his life in the past 8 months. Okay? Musk said, please triple your protection. If they can come for Trump, they will also come for you. Or no, that's not what Musk said. That was a user who said that to Musk. And then he replied, dangerous times ahead. 2 people have already tried to kill me in the past 8 months. They were arrested with guns about 20-minute drive from Tesla headquarters in Texas. Okay? Understand, it's multifaceted. This is not just limited to those who make decisions or those who are part of our government. It is applied to anybody who gets in the way of certain ideologies, right? And it's going to get dangerous. And Musk said it just as well as I would, right? Dangerous times ahead. Because unfortunately, you would think that a national atrocity like what just happened would make people take a step back, take a breath, and say, hey, this is not the right way to do things. This is not what we want to see happening. We don't want to see people making attempts on the lives of others in order to progress an agenda, right? That's just not what we want here in this country. But instead, in many ways, it has generated a emboldening of certain people who feel maybe that, it's now or never based on the fact that somebody tried it, right? And then not to mention just how much of an example was created to the laxness of security and how easily something might be able to be pulled off, right? Like this was a bad demonstration of how well guarded these people really are. Like this kind of showed that security is a joke in some ways, right? And that's, I mean, I don't know how else to say it. No, anyone who saw what happened there can blatantly understand that there was lots of failures on many levels, right? But regardless, this also drives more fear because of the assumption that Donald Trump will be the next president, right? And so that fear will drive more people to possibly go to greater lengths because of their concern about what that might mean for them. It's not how it should work, but that's just the reality, right? Grant's Modern Life. What's up, Sir Magic? What's up to you as well? Thanks for being here. And then we have Christopher Mitchell. Houston sucks. Well, I bet it sucks right now, that's for sure. But you know what? I've had some good times down in Houston. But you know, I guess more so on the outskirts. You know, I was out in the rural area, so to be fair, maybe I'm not in the middle of Houston enjoying it so much. But I'm not really a big fan of major cities anyway, and that's just where I'm at this point. Used to hang out in them quite a bit, you know. Used to be somewhat of an urbanite. I would never do it again. Just hopped on from Tim Pool's show. What's up, everybody? Eric D. Well, a lot's up, but we're glad you're here, and I hope that show was good for you, and there was some good info over there. But over here, we're talking about probably a lot of the same things, let's be honest. So, why are we concerned? What are we prepared for in this aftermath? Understand that I'm trying to bring this to your attention because I know a lot of you probably don't immerse yourselves in the rhetoric from opposite ideologies, right? Or maybe you share this ideology, but maybe you're not aware as to just how far some of it has gone. So, Hudson Valley says, do you think this will go back and forth with the political violence going forward? I think there's a likelihood of it. I hope not. But I do think that moving forward, we have to be very careful about anything that does occur and really vetting all of the information received. And to be honest with you, and this is just something I did, so maybe you would want to consider doing this as well, being that, you know, you operate a YouTube channel, which, by the way, Hudson Valley Prepping and Survival does do that. So if you want to check them out, make sure you do. But I actually archived a butt ton of footage from the event. I just recorded it and archived it, and that way, if weird things change in the future, like they seem to do sometimes, I can go back and look at some of the original footage that was released, you know, as soon as it was, and verify if there has been any weird stuff going on there, right? Because, I mean, that's just where we are at this point in time, you know, with cheap fakes and everything else, right? So that's probably good practice for a lot of you to do during times of crisis like this. It's kind of like how people used to save the newspapers from when there was a big event. Nowadays, that's called screen recording, right? It's, I mean, literally, like, you have to archive this stuff or else it might be manipulated, changed, or you might find out that what you had was actually the fake that was put out, you know, before the real information arrived, right? Like, who knows? So it's just good to be able to go back and vet some of that if you can. Now, I'm trying to give you this information because I want you to really be prepared for bad stuff to happen. I don't know what else to say. I really hope nothing happens. That's 100% my honest feeling. I don't want things to happen. I do not. I literally do not. People will say, oh, these prepper channels, they love when bad stuff happens because it's good for business, right? Or whatever you want to call it. No. Honestly, like, I literally do not want bad things to happen. I got a family, man. Like, I just don't. So if for some reason life on Earth was perfectly peaceful and we lived in utopia from now on and everything was so good that there was no reason to ever be prepared again, and it made it so my channel was basically non-existent, great, right? Like, oh no, that's the worst thing that could happen. I'm down. So hopefully that happens one day. But for right now, I don't think that we're anywhere close to that. And I also think that being prepared right now is probably the best bet you have. So in case you don't really know, like, this is from All Hip Hop, right? Not my typical news resource, but it just needs you to look at a little bit of the info that's being put out there, because this is what some people actually believe and think. And this is why I want to share this with you, because the people who honestly think this was staged, or honestly are upset that the results weren't what they wish they would have been, are the ones you should be concerned about, because either way, they are now filled with an immense fear that their only opportunity was diminished. So it's either that because it was staged, that this political campaign is just now successful no matter what, and they just solidified their winning of this next election, right? So there's no chance they'll keep him out of office. So now their future is in jeopardy, and so they may have to act, right? Like that. This is the thought process these people have. And then the other side of it, the they missed crowd, right, which is just awful. They obviously were okay with the concept to begin with in order to feel that way. So what does that create? Copycats? Does that create maybe promotion of the idea, right? Like that's what's being put out there. So that's why we should be aware of this. Like there are some people out there that are very concerning to me and that we should be very concerned about, okay? Donald Trump shooting, foes angry as they missed trends despite 2 casualties, right? It's a very sick thing to do, to be upset about this when somebody lost their life, somebody else was put in critical condition, the presidential candidate was shot through the ear. Man, by the way, I got to say this real quick. The misinformation about how ballistics works going on around the internet right now is insane to me. Is insane. The average person doesn't understand how bullets work. The average person doesn't understand what guns sound like or what they're capable of. There's a huge disconnect with any of it. I don't understand. I don't understand. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and come down here. Okay, and I got to be careful because some of this stuff is a little bit, let's just say, not quite what I usually would allow on my channel. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is some of the stuff that's out there, and I'm sharing this with you so that you understand just where we are. False flag, the shooter was one of Trump's own guys, one user on Twitter wrote, while another said, that shooting so staged, dog, they clipped Trump's ear with a rubber bullet, and now he's going to act like 50 Cent in 2003, he just won the election, right? Like this, like people believe this. And then they're, making fun of the shooter, saying he's a bad shot and everything. This levity during this isn't really the way I would have gone. Like, that's just my opinion. The hashtag staged started trending on X.com, with many people saying the entire shooting was set up by Trump's team. Another hashtag they missed, popped up as well, with messages from Trump's supporters and his haters. If you want to see how evil Democrats are, search too bad they missed. No hyperbole, the left is evil, one user posted. And liberal accounts are celebrating the attempt and saying they're sad the shooter missed. And I mean, that is true. And if you've looked at any of it, I mean, there's a lot of that going on around. And then this is the kind of stuff that's being posted, right? I've been waiting to use this right here for Trump. Can't believe they missed, right? Like, this is, and I'm not going to show anymore because like the other stuff is, like I said, not really appropriate for what I try to do here on this channel. I'm sharing that with you because that's not on the mainstream media. That's not front page news on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, or any of these other outlets. But that's on All Hip Hop, and they're willing to tell you about it, right? And some of that article was just them reporting on what's trending, right? Because like probably part of their marketing plan, like they follow trends, right? It's about hip hop. I don't think the bias was really there in the sense of like them being a politically motivated organization as much as it's just them reporting the facts and benefiting off the clicks that they're getting because it's about what just happened, right? I mean, that's just how this works. We all know it. It's unfortunate, but it's true. If I came on here tonight and the conversation was about a malaria outbreak in Malaysia, then no one would be here right now because why are we even talking about that right now? Which I agree with, by the way, because right now our country just went through a very traumatic scenario and there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of things that we should be concerned with right now that are a lot more important than malaria in some far off land, right? So like that's understandable, but I'm just saying that that's how this works, right? So why should you be concerned? There's a lot of times we're gonna get into something here that's gonna be a little, let's just call it edgy. There's a lot of times where you hear people discuss the concept of civil war, right? You hear it a lot, and I don't think that's where we're at right now, but I do think that there's gonna be a lot more conversations about it, right? And a lot of times, especially in a more right-leaning genre, which preparedness generally is, I mean, let's just be honest, it usually is based on the fact that there's firearms and stuff like that as well, right? But regardless, there is a predominant thought process that the right would obviously win a civil war because the left is unarmed and they are sensitive and everything else, right? And that's a dangerous belief to have because it's complacent. You're being complacent in the idea that you have this generalized thought about how everyone on that side of the aisle acts and how all of them are ill prepared, and then you do yourself a disservice by not being ready for what they may be capable of, right? And I'm not saying we have to worry about the left, but there are, like I said, left-wing anarcho groups that are clearly concerned about what they may have to do in order to avoid bloodbaths, right? That's how we started this conversation tonight. Okay? What am I talking about? You guys may know about this, you may not. There are some things that we should be prepared to discuss, but I am going to talk about it with you. So, let's talk about it. You can't tell I'm a little stressed. All right, this is from Rolling Stone. This is from 2023. Anti-fascist armed to the teeth. The far right brings guns to drag shows. Now the left is showing up with weapons too. Okay, let's keep moving. There's a whole story in the beginning about a armed encounter at a drag show where things were going on and everything else, right? And everyone that wasn't there for it is a white nationalist and all this other stuff. Okay, this is from Rolling Stone. You should be aware that they are heavily involved with that particular thought process. Okay, law of the minimum. What do you think about the MCK micro-conversion kits? Comes with a brace. I think they're okay. And I think that if you want a budget-friendly way to get yourself into a PDW and maybe you already have the necessary hardware, that it can do that and you'll have that capability then. So that's what I think of it. If I was allowed to choose a PDW for myself, it would not be using that platform. That's just my personal thought process on it. But it's not that it's bad and it's not that it doesn't work. It's just that I find it kind of awkward, and I would just choose something else if given a choice, but I wouldn't be upset if it's the only thing I had, I guess, right? Sorry, that's just my opinion. So, just a little quick overview here. But the far right aren't the only ones showing up armed. Across the country, marginalized individuals are forming groups, like the John Brown Gun Club and Socialist Rifle Association, that claim to be devoted to the idea of community defense. Their rationale is informed by the massacres at Colorado's Club Q and Florida's Pulse nightclub, and tempered by a long cultural distrust of the police, who they say have repeatedly failed to protect them and in some cases even perpetuated right-wing hate. Many sources interviewed for this story, particularly those who conceal their identities at protests, asked to use pseudonyms in fear of being targeted or doxxed by the far right. Others were happy to share their names, judging that their public presence or concealed carry permits shield them from harm. All of them, however, agree on one thing. The other side has guns and is willing to use them. The only answer is to be prepared to shoot back. We are a response, one JBGC member says. We exist as a response to violence. On Monday, Jason, the owner of Tulips FTW, met with the Elm Fork JBGC before the protesters showed up and asked them to leave their rifles in the cars. Weapons beget weapons. He told them we do not want things to get ugly. Okay? So, these people are getting trained, and they're getting trained to the same level you would assume like a right-wing person would be, right? This person is of the Black Cat Rifle Group, which is basically the same as the Socialist Gun Owner Group. This is not what you picture your typical left-wing agitator to look like now, is it? But yet people constantly underestimate the level of, being armed and trained that these people may have access to. And I just needed to remind you that it's not just a fluke that these things are happening. I wasn't really into guns until Trump got elected, Azad says on the ride over, but we all know there's Nazis on the streets now, and that's why we're here. I don't want to own guns and do this, but I also don't want someone coming after my wife because she's a person of color. We kind of got to do what we got to do. Okay, so And this is talking about when they were invited to a training seminar out in the desert with these groups. Why am I bringing that up? This situation has the probability of spiraling out of control. And like I said, fear is an excellent driver. And these people are afraid. As I just demonstrated with the quotes from those people who are shown training in full kit with ARs, right? With a questionable optic, right? But it's still an optic, so at least it's better than the pictures you see of people with no sights at all. And they're not on the side most people would assume. They are afraid of Donald Trump. They're afraid of his administration. And that fear is really concerning to me because it's, first off, I don't know if everyone remembers this, but the guy was president for 4 years just recently. And I don't remember all these horrible things occurring that everyone's so afraid of. So I guess he was just waiting until later? I don't know. But what I will say is that that fear isn't because they drummed it up themselves. That fear isn't because they created it themselves. That fear is specifically because the media has been telling them that they should be afraid of that. And that the media has been telling them that that's what he's going to do. And these people think that they must go against their own beliefs in order to prevent it. These people are literally saying they don't even want to own guns or train, but they're doing it because what else will stop what's coming, right? And yet, let's be honest, we got people here in our community that have guns and don't train, and then talk about how they don't have to worry about those people because, they don't even have any guns. So these groups are armed. They're getting training. Is it the best training? I don't know. It could be. For all I know. Don't act like the entire military is only on the right? Like there's a huge amount of the military that's also on the left, and they're probably training people just the same as what we see a lot of these other outfits doing, right? And I mean, we all know the public controversies between some of the more well-known groups who have weird political affiliations considering their branding, right? But regardless, I just needed you to understand, in case you maybe weren't quite aware or maybe just like had that bravado or that complacency about how things really are here in the country. But these people are scared for their lives and for the lives of those people around them that they feel to be marginalized. And they think that it may have to be their patriotic and righteous duty to prevent those people from being persecuted. And they have been convinced of that over the last 8 or 9 years by the media. And the media, especially for the older crowd, like what we're calling the boomer crowd, right? They will, to their grave, for the most part, not everyone, of course. I know some really great boomers who get it, trust me. But for the most part, they think that if it's on TV and it's being told to you by a mainstream media talking head, that it's got to be the truth. And that they should be concerned about it. And that they have to be afraid of what's coming because the guy on TV said so. That's how they were raised, right? And they just haven't figured out that things have changed. So we're in a really dangerous spot. This shooting reminded people of some things that are not good for us as a country. It reminded people that there are the possibilities of this person actually becoming president, which reminded them of all the things they've been warned about by the mainstream media over the last 8 or 9 years, which reminded them that these potential attacks are something that exist, right? And it also reminded them that maybe security isn't as strong as everybody likes to pretend it is. And it reminded them that they have access to all the same things of the people that they're afraid of do, so that maybe they should have those things as well. And we are, as a country, in a really bad spot because I'm a pretty nice guy. Like when I meet people, like I meet somebody, we shake hands. The first thing I say is not, who do you vote for, right? Like that's not how this is supposed to work. We have a good conversation, we move on, right? But I guarantee you that someone who's never met me and knows anything about me thanks to this public platform is going to paint me as a certain type of person, regardless of how I feel or what I would say to them. And if they so decide that I'm a problem for them and I'm in the way of their ability to prevent this persecution on a mass level of people that they feel need protection, well, maybe they will make sure I'm not in the way anymore. And you have to consider this at this point in time. You have to, and you have to be honest with yourself. Understand your personal identity, but then understand how you are profiled. And that profiling is more important than what you actually are when it comes to what people may be willing to do. And that's you have to be honest with yourself and take certain steps. Off-Road Armada, you got my back. Well, I appreciate that. I got your back too, okay? And I also love Bacon Doombird, so glad you're here. But seriously, think about what's on your car. Think about what's on your backpack. Think about what you wear on a daily basis. Think about how you're broadcasting yourself to the public domain. And then ask yourself if that's actually the best and most practical way to enhance your personal security. And ask yourself during this very tumultuous political time if you really want to have a target on your back. Honestly. And you know what? I'm guilty of it. I often wear branded clothing because I am given a lot of it, right? Like it's just what happens when you work with different brands and companies. Like you're going to get a bunch of merch and some of it's cool and I like it. But depending on what I'm about to do, it might not be the best idea to wear it, right? And, you know, if you want to have the level of pride where you're not going to allow yourself to adapt to a changing environment in order to raise your chances of survival, then you should really think about that when it comes to anything else related to SHTF or anything else we discuss here, right? Like, could you imagine SHTF happens and you're like, I'm wearing neon yellow today because that's what I want to wear. Why would you wear neon yellow? You're going to stick out like a sore thumb. Everyone's going to look at you. You're going to create attention. You don't want attention right now. Well, I'm wearing it anyway because that's who I am. All right, have a good time in the wasteland wearing neon yellow, right? Like you wouldn't do that then. So like, why are you doing it now? Like these are all things to keep in mind. I'm not telling you have to change your life or change who you are. I'm telling you to be smart about your decisions when it comes to how you're being profiled. So, Kathy B looks skinny and hungry. I wish I could look skinny and hungry even now, but I just don't always. So, listen. Gregor Zamina, such a sweet Pepe Le Pew. The path of righteous is beset on all sides by evil. Stay righteous and gray man. Yep. Yeah, I appreciate that, Gregor Zamina. I really did. Vincent Boogaloo, well said, MP, but true. Sad but true. Yep, I know. I'm trying my best here to make it make sense, you know. So that's just where we are. And I don't know what to say. Listen, if you like the live stream, please hit the like button, subscribe if you don't mind. It really helps the channel move forward, and I'm supposed to say these things, so I'm trying to remember to. And if you're on Replay Crew, make sure you check in the comments, because I really appreciate getting those comments in over the next couple of days where people are like, hey, Replay Crew, checking in. I came back to watch. I came back to listen. That really helps motivate me to get into next week's live stream as well, because it's important. It's important to me knowing that people are actually coming back to get this information. So I appreciate that, and I'm really glad for your support as well. And then if you want to be in the private live stream tonight, that will be posting at 9:15. Go to my community tab on my channel page in about, let's say, 10 minutes, and then it'll be posted there for you. It's going to get posted on Subscribestar as well. So if you want to be in it, you either have to hit the join button down below and be a YouTube channel member, or you got to join Subscribestar, which is $5 a month. But it's a way to get exclusive content. It's a way to get direct communication. It's also a way to just support me directly, and I appreciate that as well. It's not required. I'll never hold information for all you all behind a paywall. It's more of a casual conversation that we have, but it's just a good way to network and, I don't know, build some relationships. So listen, head on a swivel, stay vigilant, be alert, be smart about what you're doing and how you're acting and who you're around, right? And I hate to say this, but prepare for this aftermath and prepare for it to get worse. I will never prepare in an optimistic fashion, right? Especially after events like this. Be ready for the worst, and when it doesn't happen, you'll be so much better off. But if you're not ready for that, and you're always trying to say that nothing's going to happen, and things do, it's probably going to put you in a bad spot. So, Doombird says the 80s were great. I have to agree, okay? You're not on replay crew, CS Tech. Well, I still appreciate you being here. Naref04, good to see you as well. Everyone have an excellent night. I will see you all next week. Every Monday night, we're doing it.